An online post, a Facebook post to be specific, recently went viral, which showed that there is a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to Obamacare, specifically the Affordable Care Act, which we all know is the same thing as Obamacare. Now, there was an individual, we have completely, redacted the person's identity just because I don't want to do this to embarrass him, recently posted a headline that read the following: Senate votes 51-48 to repeal Obamacare. Now, he was super, super excited about this, right? He's like, this is great. We need to do away with it. It's horrible. And then it turns out that he actually loves that he's covered under the Affordable Care Act. So let me give you more details. He says, this makes us one step closer to fixing the mistake. So one person commented to what he posted and said, really cool of you to treat those of us who need assistance provided by the Affordable Care Act with such disregard. Really sells that whole underlying theme of Republicans acting like vindictive. Okay, you can read the rest. So the person was against it. And so the original poster responds with the following, and I thought this was interesting, and I want you to understand that this is not about this isolated incident. I think that this is indicative of what we're seeing throughout the country right now. Yeah. So he writes, Jesus, where to start? First, we're talking about Obamacare, not the Affordable Care Act. Secondly, my health insurance is through the Affordable Care Act, so I'm definitely not the kind of person to look down on others for needing help. I'm just saying I'm glad that this is finally happening because Obamacare was a failure from the start. Remember healthcare.gov? All of this was the brainchild of liberals, and they couldn't even get that site to run right. So why should any of us have had faith they could get socialized healthcare right? We didn't, and they couldn't. Again, it was a mistake that is finally being fixed. Okay, so as you can imagine, a lot of people responded to him like trying to figure out if he was really this misinformed. But the reality is, yes, there are a lot of people out there because of careful messaging and strategic messaging by the Republican Party. A lot of people don't know that it's the same thing. There was a poll done a few years ago by CNBC. I want to give you the details to that poll. It's graphic 22. I'm sorry, let's go to graphic 21 first. According to this poll, okay, 46% of the group that was surveyed was asked about Obamacare, and they opposed the law, while 37% of the group was asked about the Affordable Care Act, and they opposed the law. So if it was called the Affordable Care Act, more people were in favor of it. If it was called Obamacare, less people were in favor of it.
Yeah, and this is a big fault of the Obama administration, because they sort of embraced Obamacare. No, not sort of. They embraced Obamacare. They didn't pick it. They didn't choose it, but they fully embraced it. I think they thought it would be successful and that it would help them, and it unquestionably hurt. Unquestionably hurt because it had his name tied to it, and it whatever, not specifically because it just had his name tied to it, but the negativity got tied to it with that name. Mm-hmm. And they never got out of the way of that because, as you're about to point out, all the provisions in it are popular.
Yes.
But you couldn't get around the fact that it was Obamacare and the notion that Obamacare represented big government,
and
whereas the Affordable Care Act and socialized medicine and the ACA it was the Affordable Care Act is incredibly well named and has a cool, easy to remember acronym too.
Yeah.
ACA, all of that blown. That's a political defeat for the Democrats and for the president.
So this man tweeted on. He's a guy that's on my Twitter feed who hates me. But he tweeted that he said, I didn't know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act were the same thing.
Is that right? Oh, really?
Yeah. And he said, I think that this has made me look at myself and think that maybe I may be a little racist. And he said, because I hate everything Obama. And then he put it on Twitter, and I didn't respond.
First of all, I don't know anything about this guy, but based on his admission there, he's a good person, right? Like, because I think it takes a lot for someone to step back and say, oh my God, I was wrong or I was misinformed. That's like one of the hardest things for us to do. We're human beings, right? Like, I get that. But for him to do that in a very public forum is admirable. So I appreciate that.
There was more to this, and I don't want to force you to replay more, but I was dubious about that.
We have a graphic of his, when he got challenged and then he responded.
You want to do it?
I thought you wanted to read that just in case. But.
Yeah, well, you can put that, whatever graphic that is up, because this guy then, because he points out, he's like, I'm not on Obamacare. My insurance is through the Affordable Care Act. And then, as you might imagine,
They went in.
The relentlessness came. Yeah. Basically, it was a string of Facebook messages saying, they're the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
So there were parts of it that made me not believe this, that made me feel like it was all planted. But just the way, remember the line in the earlier when you read, remember healthcare.gov, all this was the blame child of liberals. That read like what a liberal would imagine a conservative says.
Right.
But where I think that may be true, well, one, because you just got a response from somebody on Twitter, exactly the same thing. So suggesting there are people out there, and your poll numbers indicate that too, with that 9% gap. So the guy didn't respond once and I think if you were crafting this, you would have had the guy respond.
Yeah.
Like that gives that. Then I went back to believing, well, it might be true because the guy was like, oh my God, I got to get out of this conversation because I've been exposed for this huge mistake. You get the impression he was like, what are they talking about? And then he Googled it.
I think if it were me, I would have deleted the whole thing. As soon as it was that is the Affordable Care Act, I would have been deleting my entire account. I need to take my internet privileges taken away from me. I am stupid.
But I think even if they did, once somebody gets a hold of this, it's
screenshots
out there,
and everything.
Right,
it's out there. He could have deleted it.
I don't know. I think that this again is indicative of something we're seeing throughout the country, and it says something. It says something about messaging, misinformation, propaganda, just how much it has infiltrated the minds of Americans on both sides, left and right. You know, so we need to be careful about that. We need to fact check. We need to look things up, especially when there are some crazy accusations between anyone. And look, we're fair. Like we covered the whole BuzzFeed drama that happened this week with them, publishing that leaked document. That wasn't right. Like, we hate Trump, but it's not right to just put unverified crap on the internet.
You know who's going to stop Trump, stop the establishment, stop the corruption? You are. You help us hire new investigative reporters, and we will unleash it on them. tytnetwork.com/go. Let's build the best journalism team in America.